Ghost had been returned 4 times. Not for aggression, not for destruction, not for any of the reasons that get a dog returned from a family that can no longer manage him. He had been returned each time for the same reason, written with slight variations in 4 separate intake notes over 14 months, will not settle. Refuses to engage. Sits at the door and will not move from it. 4 families. 4 doors. The same dog, sitting at the same angle, with the same expression in his amber eyes. Not distress, not aggression, something closer to patience. The patience of a dog who has been trained to hold a position until the command changes, and who has not yet accepted that the command will not be coming back. His handler's name had been Lieutenant Commander James Alderman. James had been 31 years old when he died. SEAL Team 4, Kunar Province, April. Ghost had been his dog for 4 years. They had been brought home on the same transport, and they had been separated at the facility, and Ghost had never been told why. Because dogs are not told why. They simply wait. Cole Marsh had been trying to find Ghost a permanent home for 14 months. He was about to run out of options. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. What happens when an old woman says one name is something none of us in that room will ever forget. Stay with us until the very end. We read every single comment and we are grateful for every one of you. Cole Marsh was 37 years old and had the specific, settled physicality of a man who had spent 15 years being useful in difficult places and was now in the process of learning what useful looked like in places that were merely ordinary. He was 6 feet even, broad through the back, with dark brown hair going to gray at the temples faster than he would have preferred, and a face that people trusted without always knowing why. Square and weathered and honest in the way of faces that have never had to perform anything, because the situations they encountered never rewarded performance. His eyes were a clear, steady hazel, green shot, quiet, with the particular quality of someone who had learned to receive information from environments before those environments announced themselves. In the SEAL community, this was called reading the room. Cole had been reading rooms for 15 years, in Helmand Province in 2012 and 2015, in Mosul in 2017, and in Kunar Province in April, where he had been 40 feet from James Alderman when the situation became a different kind of situation, and where he had done what training required of him, and where he had come home in the particular way that you come home when someone who was supposed to come home with you did not. He had been a senior chief petty officer. He had retired 3 months after Kunar, not because anything had been asked of him, but because the answer to the question of whether to continue was not, for the first time in 15 years, clear. He had moved to a rental house in Coronado and had begun the process of learning what not clear felt like and what to do inside it. What he was doing inside it, among other things, was trying to find Ghost a home. He had been James's closest teammate for 6 of the 7 years James had been with SEAL Team 4. He had known Ghost as the third presence in the operational ecosystem of a partnership that functioned at the level of a single organism, James moving left, Ghost moving left, the two of them reading the same environment through different instruments, the information passing between them in the compressed language of trained attention. He had known Ghost as the dog who found the device outside Kandahar in 2013 before anyone else registered that anything was wrong. He had known Ghost as the dog who had been waiting at the facility when James's remains came home, and who had been waiting at the facility since. He had tried 4 families who had read the adoption profile, who had the yard space and the experience and the appropriate backgrounds, and who had called him after 2 weeks or 3 weeks or, in the case of the 4th family, 11 days to say, "He won't settle. He just sits at the door. We don't know what he's waiting for." Cole knew what he was waiting for. He also knew that what Ghost was waiting for was not coming back, and that the question he had been trying to answer for 14 months was what came next when what you were waiting for was not coming back. He had been thinking about this on a Thursday morning when he called James's mother. Eleanor Alderman was 79 years old and had been a widow since 1998, which was long enough that she had stopped organizing her life around the absence and had reorganized it around the presence of everything that remained: her garden, her neighbors, the particular habits of a woman who had learned to make a small life feel complete by taking very good care of it. She lived in the house in Banning, California, where James had grown up, a cream-colored bungalow with a persimmon tree in the front yard, and a back garden that she maintained with a schedule and a precision that her neighbors occasionally compared, with affection, to military operations. She was 5'2" and weighed less than she had at 65, which her doctor mentioned, and which she ignored with the calm authority of a woman who had raised a Navy SEAL and understood that certain opinions, however medically credentialed, were advisory rather than mandatory. Her hair was white and kept short, and her eyes were the specific blue that James's had been. The pale, clear blue that people called Arctic, which was the right word because it implied both clarity and temperature, a combination that was accurate for both of them. She had her son's stillness. She had arrived at it by a different route. Cole had met Eleanor 3 times, twice when James had brought him home for weekends in 2016 and 2018, and once at the memorial in May, where she had shaken Cole's hand and held it for a moment longer than a handshake and said, "Thank you for being with him." She had said it in the specific way of a person who means the precise words and nothing beyond them, and Cole had said, "It was my honor," and had meant the precise words and nothing beyond them, and they had understood each other completely. He called her on a Thursday morning and told her about Ghost. He told her about the 4 families. He told her about the door sitting, the amber eyes, the intake notes that all said the same thing. He told her that he was running out of options and that the program's patience for a dog who couldn't find permanent placement had a timeline, and that the timeline was not long. Eleanor was quiet for a moment after he finished. "Bring him here," she said. Cole started to explain why that might not be Cole, she said, in the tone she used when explaining things to people who were being unnecessarily complicated about them. "Bring him here." He drove to Banning on a Saturday. The man Cole passed on Eleanor's front walk was named Russell Klein. He was 48 years old and was Eleanor's nephew by marriage, the son of Eleanor's late husband's younger sister, which made him a connection by a route complicated enough that Cole had required a moment to trace when Eleanor had mentioned him on the phone. He had been managing Eleanor's financial affairs for 2 years, ever since Eleanor's eyesight had declined enough that reading fine print had become unreliable, and he drove a vehicle that was newer than anything a man managing a retired schoolteacher's finances on a volunteer basis would ordinarily be driving. Cole noted this. He noted it the way he noted things, without expression, without announcement. The information filed in the part of his mind that organized incoming data by potential significance. He had been noting things about people and situations for 15 years, and the habit did not turn off because he was in a residential neighborhood in Banning. He nodded at Russell Klein. Russell Klein nodded back with the specific half-attention of a man whose mind is elsewhere, got into his vehicle, and drove away. Cole rang the bell. Eleanor answered the door with the persimmon tree behind her and the particular quality of a woman who has been expecting someone and is prepared. She looked at Cole. She looked at Ghost on the lead beside him. Ghost looked at Eleanor. He went very still. Not the door-sitting stillness of 14 months of waiting. Something different. Something that was not patience but recognition. the specific whole-body attention of a working dog who has encountered a sensory input that the database identifies as significant. Cole felt it through the lead. The subtle shift in weight, the ears forward, the breathing changed. He did not say anything. Eleanor stepped down from the doorstep onto the front path and stood in front of Ghost and looked at him the way she had looked at Cole at the memorial. With the specific, direct attention of a woman who means to see what she is looking at and is going to take the time to do it properly. Ghost looked back at her, the amber eyes, the 4-year-old record of a partnership and everything it had been. Eleanor reached out her hand, palm up, the way you offer your hand to a dog you do not know. Ghost put his nose to it. He held it there for a moment, reading, and then Eleanor said, very quietly, the name she had called her son since he was 3 years old. Jimmy. The sound that came out of Ghost was not a bark. It was not a whine. It was the sound that escapes a creature when something that has been locked for a very long time opens all at once. A low, broken vocalization that Cole had never heard from this dog in 5 years of knowing him, and that turned, as he stood on that front path with the lead loose in his hand, into something he was not prepared for, and for which he did not have a sufficient response and did not try to construct one. Ghost pressed himself against Eleanor's legs and held there. Eleanor put both hands in his fur and stood in her front garden and looked at the persimmon tree and did not say anything else. Cole looked at the street where Russell Klein's vehicle had gone and held very still. He stayed for dinner. Eleanor cooked with the focused, unsentimental competence of someone who considers cooking a logistical problem with an optimal solution and pursues that solution without drama, and the result was a meal that Cole ate without speaking much. Because Eleanor was not the kind of person who needed conversation to fill a room, and he had learned this in 2016 and relearned it now. Ghost ate from a bowl Eleanor produced from somewhere, the specific bowl, Cole realized, that he had seen in James's team house in Virginia Beach, which meant Eleanor had it. Which meant James had sent it home at some point and Eleanor had kept it, because Eleanor kept things that mattered. After dinner, Cole helped with the dishes and Eleanor told him about Russell Klein. She told him because she had decided to. He had not asked. She had the particular directness of a woman who has assessed a situation and determined that the time for circumlocution has passed, and she said, Russell has been managing my accounts for 2 years, and I'm beginning to wonder if he has been managing them for Russell. She said it with the flat, unornamented accuracy of someone reporting an observation rather than making an accusation, and Cole received it the same way, as data, filed in the appropriate category to be acted on. What have you seen? He said. She had seen 3 things. She had seen a transfer notice from her bank that described a recurring monthly transfer she had not authorized, in an amount that Russell had explained, when she asked, as a management fee that she had agreed to at the start of the arrangement. She did not remember agreeing to it. She did not have a document that showed she had agreed to it. She had looked for one and had not found it. She had a folder in the kitchen drawer with everything she had found. Because Eleanor kept folders. Cole looked at Ghost, who was lying at Eleanor's feet and who had not moved from Eleanor's side since the front path. May I look at the folder? Cole said. Eleanor got it. He spent the following week doing what he had done in the 19 days before the Saturday morning in Mill Creek, working the tasks, making the calls, building the case. He called the Veterans Legal Advocacy Network in San Diego and was connected to an attorney named Bridget Nakamura who handled elder financial exploitation cases in California and who, when Cole described the folder's contents, said, 3 things I need. The original account statements showing the recurring transfer origin dates, the signed agreement for financial management services if one exists, and any documentation of communication between Eleanor and Russell about the arrangement. Eleanor had all of it. The original statements were organized by year in a manila folder with the year written on the tab in her handwriting, and the signed agreement for financial management services did not exist, which was information. And the communication between Eleanor and Russell was a series of handwritten notes that Eleanor had made of their phone conversations, dated and initialed, which was the kind of thing that a retired school teacher who had raised a Navy SEAL did as a matter of habit, and which turned out to be the kind of thing that an elder financial exploitation attorney described as the most complete contemporaneous documentation she had seen in 8 years of practice. The recurring monthly transfer, documented over 26 months, totaled $41,800. Cole drove to Banning on a Wednesday and sat at Eleanor's kitchen table with Ghost at his feet and read Bridget Nakamura's assessment aloud to Eleanor, who listened in the way she listened to everything, without interruption, without visible distress, with the patient attention of a woman receiving information she has already suspected and is now confirming. "What happens next?" Eleanor said. "A formal complaint to the California Department of Justice Elder Financial Crimes Unit," Cole said, "and a civil filing to recover the transferred funds." Eleanor nodded once. "All right," she said. Ghost put his chin on Eleanor's foot and held it there. Russell Klein retained an attorney in Palm Springs who filed 2 motions in the first week and sent a letter to Eleanor that was designed, Bridget Nakamura told Cole when she read it, to suggest that Eleanor's memory was unreliable and that the arrangement had been clearly documented and mutually understood. The letter was not submitted as evidence because it was correspondence, but its content became useful in a different way. It established, in the record, that Russell Klein was aware of the dispute and had made a specific claim about Eleanor's memory. A claim that the contemporaneous notes in Eleanor's handwriting directly contradicted with dated specificity across 26 months. The California Department of Justice Elder Financial Crimes Unit accepted the complaint in week 3. A civil judgment was rendered 4 months later. The full amount, $41,800, was ordered returned along with legal costs, and Russell Klein's authority to act as a financial agent for Eleanor or any other California resident was formally revoked by the state agency that had licensed it. He was not charged criminally. The civil judgment had been the mechanism that was available, and it was sufficient. And Eleanor had her money back, and Russell Klein did not have access to another elderly person's accounts. Bridget Nakamura told Cole that Eleanor's folder was what made it possible. Cole told Eleanor. Eleanor said, "I knew the folder would matter eventually. Things that matter should be kept." Ghost had been living at the bungalow in Banning since the Saturday of the front path. He had not sat at the door. He had not refused. He had taken up a position at the foot of Eleanor's bed at night, and a position beside her chair in the living room in the morning, and a position in the back garden in the afternoon, on the shaded side of the persimmon tree, from which he monitored the garden's perimeter with the professional thoroughness of a working dog, who considers the perimeter his responsibility and does not clock out for a persimmon tree. Eleanor had found this enormously reassuring and had told Cole so in a phone call that was, by the standards of their communication, almost effusive. Cole had driven to Banning once a week since October. He would drive to Banning once a week for as long as it was useful, which he suspected was going to be a long time, and which he did not mind, because there was something in the particular combination of Eleanor's kitchen and Ghost's presence and the persimmon tree's specific quality of light in the November afternoon that had begun to feel, in the imprecise but accurate way of things that are true, like somewhere he was supposed to be. 6 months after the Saturday on the front path. Cole Marsh was in Eleanor's back garden on a May afternoon that had committed entirely to being warm, sitting in one of the garden chairs that Eleanor kept in the shade of the persimmon tree, and that she arranged, he had noticed, with the same precision she applied to everything, angled for conversation, for the garden sightlines, for the afternoon light. He had a cup of coffee. Eleanor had tea. They had covered the garden's current status and the progress of the civil recovery, and had arrived at the comfortable silence that accumulates between people who have been through something together and have no need to perform its absence. Ghost was in the garden. He was doing what he did in the afternoon, working the perimeter of the back garden with his systematic, unhurried circuit, nose to the beds and then up, ears tracking the neighborhood sounds, the amber eyes finding the movement of a cat along the back fence and logging it and returning to the sweep. He was not a yard dog. He was a working dog in a yard, which was a different thing, and which Eleanor had understood immediately, and which was, Cole suspected, part of why it worked. He completed the circuit and came to the shade of the persimmon tree and sat beside Eleanor's chair and pressed himself against her leg in the specific close way that he had pressed against her on the front path 6 months ago, and Eleanor put her hand in his fur without looking away from the garden, the way you reach for something that has become part of the furniture of your days. "Good boy," she said. Ghost's tail moved. Slow, full, certain, Cole looked at the garden, the tomatoes, the late roses, the persimmon tree with its November fruit gone, and its spring leaves fresh, and the specific quality of the shade it threw across the afternoon. He thought about James Alderman, who had grown up in this garden and who had sat in this shade and who had sent a dog bowl home to his mother, and who was, in the imprecise and accurate way of things that are true, present here in the particular combination of a dog's loyalty and an old woman's hands in his fur, and the light coming through the persimmon leaves at the right angle for a May afternoon in Banning, California. He did not say anything about this. It did not require saying. Eleanor knew, Ghost knew, the garden knew, in the way that gardens know the things that have happened in them. Cole drank his coffee. The afternoon held. Sometimes miracles do not come as answered prayers. Sometimes they come as 14 months of a dog sitting at a door, refusing every home that was offered, holding a position that made no practical sense, until the day arrives when the right person opens the right door and says the right name. Sometimes God does not redirect our waiting into something easier. He honors it. He lets it be what it is, the faithfulness of a creature who cannot be told that the waiting is over, and who waits anyway, because faithfulness does not require a reason to remain faithful. Ghost could not have explained what he was waiting for. He simply knew that no door was the right door yet. And in the fullness of time that is not our time to set, the right door opened, and an old woman said a name, and the waiting was over. We do not always understand the waiting we are asked to do. We do not always understand the direction we are pointed in while we wait. But there are creatures in this world who demonstrate, without the ability to explain it, that the things worth staying for are worth every day of staying. That the specific weight of a dog against your legs is a form of faithfulness that human language has never quite been adequate to describe, and that, when it arrives, we recognize it, because it is a thing we were made to recognize. If Ghost and Eleanor's story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to know that the waiting is not wasted. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from, and tell us, have you ever waited for something longer than made sense and found that the waiting was exactly right? We want to hear your story. Your words may be what carries someone else through today. If you believe in stories of faithfulness, patience, and the quiet grace of God honoring the things we hold on to, please subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next one. May God bless you, protect your family, and remind you always that the right door is out there. Don't stop waiting for it.